Welcome back! Unless you're joining us for the first time, in which case, what are you doing? It's chapter 2. Go watch chapter 1. Ishmael's sad, he's broke, and he's gotta go to sea. Is Herman Melville racist? Probably. Is Ishmael cringe? Probably. Is anything finally going to happen? Probably. Well, let's find out in chapter 2, The Carpet Bag. So, guys, I'm just gonna let you know ahead of time that this book uses some language that I would never deem acceptable or would use myself. The sad reality of books that are written in this time period is that they are a bit racist, and in some places they are more than a bit racist. For this reason, among others, there are people who believe that the classics don't have any value to us anymore, that we shouldn't be reading them. I'm not here to argue whether or not we should be reading the classics, because I am. I'm gonna finish Moby Dick, I'm gonna be bringing it to you guys. I'm assuming that if you're watching this show, then you have an interest in that. So I'm not going to be censoring this book at all, as much as it is gonna make me uncomfortable to read it as written, but, what I can promise you is that we'll have discussions about it, we'll have honest discussions about it, and I'll especially want to hear from you guys on what you think about this. Because there are some people who are going to hear what is written in this chapter and they're going to be like, what's even the problem? That's not even as bad as Huck Finn. And then there are other people who are going to be mad that I am even reading this book. So I don't want to cut anyone out of the conversation, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but yeah, like I said, I am going to read this as written, and if this is where we say goodbye to each other, then I'm sad to see you go, but I understand. With that said, let's read a damn book. I stuffed a shirt or two into my old carpet bag, tucked it under my arm, and started off for Cape Horn and the Pacific. Interesting choice. No pants, Ishmael. Just 2 shirts. Quitting the good city of Old Manhattan, I duly arrived in New Bedford. It was a Saturday night in December. Cold. Much was I disappointed upon learning that the little packet for Nantucket had already sailed, and that no way of reaching that place would offer until the following Monday. As most young candidates for the pains and penalties of whaling stop at this same New Bedford, thence to embark on their voyage, it may as well be related that I, for one, had no idea of so doing, for my mind was made up to sail in none other than a Nantucket craft, because there was a fine, boisterous something about everything connected with that famous old island, which amazingly pleased me. Besides, though New Bedford has of late been gradually monopolizing the business of whaling, and though in this matter poor old Nantucket is now much behind her, yet Nantucket was her great original, the Tyre of this Carthage. The place where the first dead American whale was stranded. Where else but from Nantucket did those aboriginal whalemen, the red men, first sally out in canoes to give chase to the Leviathan? And where but from Nantucket, too, did that first adventurous little sloop put forth, partly laden with imported cobblestones, so goes the story, to throw at the whales, in order to discover when they were nigh enough to risk a harpoon from the bowsprit? So we have a mention of Tyre and Carthage. Again, this reverence and respect for old ancient places and names and characters. Tyre being a city that was founded before Carthage. So this is to say that Nantucket is the OG and New Bedford better watch its mouth. In fact, Nantucket is so the OG when it comes to whaling that it's been a whaling town even before America existed. And that's the reason that he's referencing the Native Americans in this case, to say that this is something that predates even the United States. Now, having a night, a day, and still another night following before me in New Bedford ere I could embark for my destined port, it became a matter of concernment where I was to sleep and eat meanwhile. It was a very dubious-looking, nay, a very dark and dismal night, bitingly cold and cheerless. I knew no one in the place. With anxious grapnels, I had sounded my pocket and only brought up a few pieces of silver. So wherever you go, Ishmael, said I to myself, as I stood in the middle of a dreary street, shouldering my bag and comparing the gloom towards the north with the darkness towards the south. Wherever in your wisdom you may conclude to lodge for the night, my dear Ishmael, be sure to inquire the price, and don't be too particular. So, Ishmael is about to start a little Goldilocks journey through New Bedford. With halting steps, I paced the streets and passed the sign of the Crossed Harpoons, but it looked too expensive and jolly there. Further on, from the bright red windows of the Swordfish Inn, there came such fervent rays that it seemed to have melted the packed snow and ice from before the house, for everywhere else but the congealed frost lay 10 inches thick in a hard asphaltic pavement. I got something hard you could lay 10 inches thick. Rather weary for me when I struck my foot against the flinty projections, because from hard, remorseless service the soles of my boots were in a most miserable plight. Too expensive and jolly again, thought I, pausing one moment to watch the broad glare in the street and hear the sounds of the tinkling glasses within. But go on, Ishmael, said I at last. Don't you hear? Get away from before the door. Your patched boots are stopping the way. So on I went. I now by instinct followed the streets that took me waterward. For there, doubtless, were the cheapest, if not the cheeriest inns. Such dreary streets! Blocks of blackness, not houses on either hand, and here and there a candle, like a candle moving about in a tomb. At this hour of the night, of the last day of the week, that quarter of the town proved all but deserted, but presently I came to a smoky light proceeding from a low, wide building, the door of which stood invitingly open. It had a careless look, as if it were meant for the use of the public, so entering, the first thing I did was to stumble over an ash box in the porch. Ha! Thought I. Ha! As the flying particles almost choked me. Are these the ashes from that destroyed city, Gomorrah? But the Crossed Harpoons and the Swordfish Inn, this, then, must needs be the sign of the Trap. However, I picked myself up, and hearing a loud voice within, pushed on and opened a second interior door. Alright, so first in, too cheerful. Second in, too cheerful. This third place he's gonna go, I'm just gonna spoil it for you guys. It's a black church service. And Melville's language in describing it is not super flattering. But here we go. It seemed the great black parliament sitting in Tophet, 100 black faces turned round in their rows to peer, and beyond, a black angel of doom was beating a book in a pulpit. It was a Negro church, and the preacher's text was about the blackness of darkness, and the weeping and wailing and teeth gnashing there. Ha! Ishmael, muttered I, backing out. Wretched entertainment at the sign of the Trap. Alright, this paragraph sucks. I don't like it. On one hand, we can read it as Ishmael walked into a church service, and it's not the inn that he was looking for, so a little bit embarrassed, he just quietly excuses himself and leaves. Except that's not what happened. We have this fixation on the color of these people's skin in order to make them seem scary to Ishmael. It's possible that Melville is just trying to tell us that Ishmael is racist at this point in the story. It could be that Melville is developing a metaphor around black and white with these images and the images of the white whale that he's going to be extending throughout the novel. But the thing is that people aren't metaphors, people are people. And if you treat them just as a metaphor, you're depriving them of their essential humanity. So in my opinion, neither Ishmael or Melville get a pass on this paragraph. I wish this wasn't in here. But I can't change the book. On we go. Moving on, I at last came to a dim sort of outhanging light not far from the docks and heard a forlorn creaking in the air, and looking up, saw a swinging sign over the door with a white painting upon it, faintly representing a tall straight jet of misty spray, and these words underneath: The Spouter Inn. Peter Coffin. Coffin? Spouter. Rather ominous in that particular connection, thought I, but it is a common name in Nantucket, they say. And I suppose this Peter here is an emigrant from there, as the light looked so dim, and the place for the time looked quiet enough, and the dilapidated little wooden house itself looked as if it might have been carted here from the ruins of some burnt district, and as the swinging sign had a poverty-stricken sort of creak to it, I thought that here was the very spot for cheap lodgings and the best of pea coffee. It says pea coffee. Oh, that's coffee made from chickpeas. It's a poor substitute. It was a queer sort of place. Go off, Queen. A gable-ended old house, one side palsied, as it were, and leaning over sadly. It stood on a sharp, bleak corner where that tempestuous wind, Euroclydon, kept up a worse howling than ever it did about poor Paul's tossed craft. Euroclydon, nevertheless, is a mighty pleasant zephyr to anyone indoors, with his feet on the hob quietly toasting for bed. Ishmael's starting to annoy me, guys. I get that Ishmael used to be a schoolmaster, he's very knowledgeable about a lot of different things, but my god, he doesn't need to tell us everything. I'm also starting to see some cracks in the picture of himself that he's painting. Last chapter, he said that he could perceive a horror and be social with it. Would it let me? And yet, he's scared of black people, so he's really kind of undercutting his argument that he can get along with anyone. But alright, Ishmael's got a lot to say here, so let's get to it. In judging of that tempestuous wind called Euroclydon, says an old writer of whose works I possess the only copy extant. Weird flex? It maketh a marvellous difference whether thou lookest out at it from a glass window, where the frost is all on the outside, or whether thou observest it from that sashless window, where the frost is on both sides, and of which the white death is the only glazier. True enough, thought I, as this passage occurred to my mind. Old black letter, thou reasonest well. Yes, these eyes are windows, and this body of mine is the house. What a pity they didn't stop up the chinks and crannies, though, and thrust in a little bit of lint here and there. But it's too late to make any improvements now. The universe is finished, the capstone is on, and the chips were carted off 1,000,000 years ago. Poor Lazarus there, chattering his teeth against the curbstone for his pillow, and shaking off his tatters with his shiverings. He might plug up both ears with rags and put a corn cob into his mouth, and yet that would not keep out the tempestuous Euroclydon. Euroclydon, says old Dives in his red silken wrapper. He had a redder one afterwards. That means he went to hell. Pooh-pooh. What a fine, frosty night. How Orion glitters! What northern lights! Let them talk of their oriental summer climes of everlasting conservatories. Give me the privilege of making my own summer with my own coals. But what thinks Lazarus? Can he warm his blue hands by holding them up to the grand northern lights? Would not Lazarus rather be in Sumatra than here? Would he not far rather lay him down lengthwise along the length of the equator? Yea, ye gods, go down to the fiery pit itself in order to keep out this frost. Now that Lazarus should lie stranded there on the curbstone before the door of Dives, this is more wonderful than that an iceberg should be moored to one of the Moluccas. Yet Dives himself, he too lives like a czar in an ice palace made of frozen sighs. And being president of a temperance society, he only drinks the tepid tears of orphans. Same. But no more of this blubbering now. We're a-going a-whaling! And there is plenty of that yet to come. My god, what a pun, Melville. Let us scrape the ice from our frosted feet and see what sort of a place this spouter may be. So this whole bit about Lazarus and Euroclydon, this is Ishmael kind of drawing a comparison between himself and Lazarus. Poor Lazarus in his rags, Ishmael out in the cold, looking for a warm place. Dives is rich and comfortable, but is condemned to hell for his excess. Lazarus is poor and humble, and is saved. But Ishmael is not Lazarus. The real irony of this is that Ishmael doesn't have to be out in the cold right now. He was just in a warm place. And he left of his own free will. No one in the church kicked him out, told him to get lost. Not to say that a church and an inn are the same thing, but it's a roof over your head and there are people in there who are probably going to be willing to help you. Okay, what is all this Euroclydon stuff? It says that Euroclydon is a tempestuous wind that buffets the Apostle Paul's ship after the master and owner ignore his warnings. We have an instance of this kind of in this chapter. Ishmael ignores the ominous warnings that he feels walking into this sermon and continues out into the cold and then is buffeted by the wind. Melville focuses a lot on blackness and darkness in that passage in the church. If we compare that with a little bit later when he's talking about Euroclydon, he talks about observing it from the sashless window where the frost is on both sides and of which the white death is the only glazier. But we also have this reference to the great hooded phantom in the last chapter, like a snow hill in the air. So we have kind of this uneasy tension between white and black. Ishmael ironically feels out of place in the black church despite the fact that it's warm and inviting. It has a door that is invitingly open, and he ironically goes out into the wintry white night. So yeah, kind of a short chapter, not a lot happens. This inn is too cheerful, this one's too nice, uh-oh, this one has black people. But the Spouter Inn, that sounds like a guy from Nantucket. I love Nantucket. Let's go check that out. And that's chapter 2.